All right, guys, today's date is July 14th, 2020. I'm going to put together a little bit of a video here, and we're going to talk about momentum and solid closes above and below the bands. This is basically how I am using the bands on the higher time frames, meaning the monthly chart, the weekly chart, and sometimes a little bit of the daily chart. To be quite honest, the weekly and the monthly is definitely the ones to stick to. If you know how to create quarterly charts, the quarterly charts work pretty good too. But again, the weekly and the monthly are primarily the ones I'm using this for. But having said that, let's go ahead and jump into this. What I'm really doing here is I'm trying to find a new established trend, and then I'm looking for a safe pullback and an area to get in. So these are basically trend trades that I'm looking at. Of course, you're going to want to look at more than just momentum and more than just bands on getting into a trade setup. You want to consider price action, and you want to consider some of the other time frames and what they're telling you too. But I just wanted to give a brief overview of this and kind of talk about it a little bit because somebody had asked me how I use this on my chart. So let's go ahead and dive into it. Again, the first thing that I mentioned there is I'm looking for a reversal in the trend. So typically how I gauge that is the momentum on your chart is typically going to change at the beginning or end of a trend. So that's one thing that I look for. So let's say we'll just go through the pound odd is what we're going to do. We'll just go back in history and give you some examples right here. The first one we're going to touch on is we'll start right here. You can see that we had support right here, support right here, support right here. And then we came back down, came pretty darn close to support. Again, my support zones on this are going to be anywhere from right there to about right in here. The reason why I've got it there is because you can see we have some candles right here, some wicks, and then you've got a couple of candles right there. So, or you could pull back down maybe a little bit further. You've got some candle bodies right down there, a wick down there, but nonetheless, you're getting very, very close to a support zone, which means the trend may be getting ready to reverse again. So you may want to consider going long on this chart. So what I'm looking for before I do that is I want confirmation the downtrend has come to an end. And then once I have that confirmation, I want to jump in. And obviously, if it's coming down to support, you want to get on the long side. So classic example right here. You can see the THV is turned. It's turning green right here. Where my cursor's at. And that's a good indication that the trend is probably coming to an end because typically that's what happens when the THV turns green. You see a reversal in trend for a while. So what you want to do is you want to get in on the first available pullback after the market has confirmed your direction. So for me, what I'm looking for is I'm looking for a nice strong candle that takes out the upper band. In this case, you can see that we turned green down here, and then you've got a strong candle right here. This is my confirmation right here that this downtrend is over, and then you've got a new trend starting. You could even probably put a trend line in right here. And you can see we came down, we pushed up into it, came back down, kind of spiked above it. We did, or I mean, if that's not good enough, you could also do something like this right here. You can connect it to this point right here and this point right here, or this and this right here. Either way, you can see this candle took out this trend line that was in play. So the downtrend is probably going to be over. So what I want to do is I want to get in on the first available pullback. So for me, that would be a solid close above the upper band, and then the first pullback down to the lower band. Most of the time, well, a good half of the time, you're going to see a pullback into the band, and then it's going to take off. A lot of times it does not go to the other side of the band. So if you wait for it to go to the other side of the band, a lot of times you are going to miss your opportunity. So once it closes above and it pulls back into the bands, it may be good to go down to maybe, let's say, the daily time frame. This is a weekly time frame right here. It may be good to go down to the daily or the H4 to see if there's some indication that maybe this isn't going to quite pull down that far, and then you could begin to accumulate or jump into the market. But in this case, you can see we did come down to the lower band right here. And here's the key right here in this. The THV, there's the solid close. And then this is the pullback. Whoops. the first pullback to the lower band right here. The key in this is you want to make sure the THV is recently turned green when you're getting into a first touch trade, as I call them. You don't want to wait until it gets up here, it's overextended, and it's been running into the trend for a long time. The quicker you catch it from the bottom here, the better off you're going to be. And again, the reason why I like to wait till it hits the upper band, or excuse me, the lower band on something like this, is because I'm minimizing my risk quite a bit. If I got in here, my risk is going to be greater than what it is right down here. So as far as stop losses, you can determine that based on your trading preferences, but absolutely no lower than the last low. There should be no reason why we close up here and then we come all the way back down to here and continue to fall. If you go below this, there's absolutely no way you should be in that trade. So at maximum, this is your range. This is your risk right here. And you can see that it clearly went much further than that. So you got a pretty good reward to risk available here. But again, it's the beginning of a trend. And another good thing about catching it at the beginning of the trend is more likely to go out further than if you wait halfway into the trend and jump into it. So again, you want a solid close, and then you want the THV to have recently turned green and reversed when it comes to a buy. Obviously, a sell is going to be the exact opposite of that, which we'll get into here in a little bit. But you can see what happened. You had the solid close right here. You had the pullback to the lower band. THV was going up. Now, this is important too. When you're pulling back down to the lower band or back down to support, wherever you want to put your buys at, the THV should continue to move up. If it's not moving up, or if it's turning back red, there's no way you want to take that trade. So, and again, you can see another example right here. Solid close above the upper band. So most likely, the first touch of the lower band is going to create another scenario where it's going to bounce. And you can see right here, it touched the lower band, and then we took off again. Notice we are getting some separation on the THV, and we're getting into the trend a little bit. I typically don't like to take trades that are really any further than this into the THV. What I mean is the higher this goes and the further away this is getting, the more likely this is going to fail as a buy opportunity. For example, this. Let's say that you had THV all the way down to here, and you're like, man, I want to get into a sell. There's no way you should be looking at taking a sell when your THV is this overdone, because you're probably going to get a reversal and it's going to pop back up, especially as you push into support. The best area to get it at is right after it reverses right up in here, this area right here. Or maybe this area right here. Or maybe this area right here, and so forth. So that's the best area. But again, you need a solid close above the band for a buy, and then a pullback into the lower band with the momentum continuing to push up. If the momentum is not pushing up, then I'm not that interested. Let's say this is going up, price pulls back, this goes sideways. You're still seeing a little bit of momentum, but ultimately I want to see the THV continuing to move up on a pullback. So that's our first example right there. Let's just run through a little bit of this here. Let's take a look at this example right over here. Again, you've got a top, and you can see THV reversed and started pushing down. The first thing you want to look for is, shortly after the THV turns, you want to look for a solid close below the lower band. That confirms the trend has in fact changed. You need the solid close, and you need the THV to reverse as well. And you can see we just crossed down. Everything's looking really good here. But now what you're going to need is you're going to need the market to reverse, and you need to find a spot where you can sell. Again, the best area is going to be the upper band, which is going to be, let's say, maybe right up in here. You close below it. You push up into it. You can see we never pushed back up into it that far, so we weren't able to get that far to take a sell trade. You can see it sold off more and more and more. It just runaway train. It took off, and obviously you're not going to look to sell the upper band up here, even though it is falling a little bit, because the THV is now green. But again, right after it creates a solid close below the lower band and the THV turns down, that's really when you want to consider getting into this market as a short. Now, if you go down to the lower time frames, this was the top right here. Let me draw. Actually, let's move this. This is basically the candle where you're beginning to look for shorts. If you go to the daily time frame, let's see if we can find anything right here. This is going to be the area right here where it stopped and then it continued to head down. The upper band was right around here. And you can see that was just shy of the coral. Not really a lot to see there. I just wanted to touch on that because a lot of times what you have is you'll have some nice moving averages, or you'll see a pattern up there or something, and that's going to be your indication to jump into this market short. Now, the one thing that I can say about this right here, you can see that we broke below it. This was the solid close right here on the weekly. We pushed back up to it. Look where it stopped at. You had support right here. You had support. It bounced up here. Kind of fought it a little bit, broke down right here, and that's where we stopped at. So support was broken, and it became resistance, and that's where we stopped at. But anyways, next example of this, again, you want to look for a revert. You want to look for a turn on the THV. Right here, you can see we came almost down to the zero line, and then we began to cross up. So what you want to look for is you want to look for your first solid close above the upper band, which would be in this case. Let's draw the line right here. This is where it turns green. So this is your first solid close. So you would then look for the first available pullback, which could be right here, right here, right here. And you can see not one of these candles. I usually like to get in between 3 and 4 bars away pretty quickly. I don't want to wait for it to go 10 bars before I jump in. So we went 1, 2, still didn't touch it. 3, 4. We finally pulled back on the 5th one. We came down. We touched it. THV is still not overdone, so technically, according to my rules, this would be a pretty good spot to get into. And you can see it spiked up like crazy. This is where I believe the coronavirus garbage started coming out. But you can see support, the band right here, and then it just took off. We went from 193 all the way up to, well, this candle right here was 207, so about 1,400 pips. But again, solid close, first touch, and then it took off. Usually the first touch will work. Again, like I said, I would prefer to have it pull back once, twice, maybe the third candle, hit it, and then take off. Again, like I said, though, sometimes you can go down to the lower time frames, see where support might be on something like this, and maybe take a trade off of that if you don't want to wait for it to hit the lower band. But again, remember, you're adding more risk if you do that. So if you go to the daily time frame, actually, let me go back to the weekly here. There, it's going to be about right here. Go back to the daily time frame. Again, this was your solid close right here. It pulled back. It didn't even pull back to the quarter, to be quite honest. I would have liked to see that. You also can see maybe a little bit of a trend line right here. We did hit it right here. This, by the way, was the first touch of the lower band. It was a trend line as well as the coral. So this was actually a very solid area. Right here, we weren't able to pull back to the trend line or the coral. Had we pulled back to the trend line or coral right here, guess what? This would have been the first touch area on the weekly chart. Here, we'll draw a line in right there. Go back to the weekly chart. Again, right here, here's the lower band. If we would have pulled back into this, obviously we would have... Actually, it's right here. Let me zoom in just a little bit. Or a lot, I guess. Solid close. Here's the trend line up. If it would have pulled back down into it, let's say this is where it touched at, it would have had to come back down into this region right in here. So you can see it definitely didn't go back that far. But the second one actually turned out really, really nice. Again, like I said, you have the trend line. Go back to the daily. You've got the trend line and the coral right there. And that was the first touch of the lower band. Momentum is up. Momentum's still going up. So that was actually a pretty decent area to get into the market. And you can see it popped really, really good. Now in terms of the next one here, again, always go down to your lower time frames to look for more confluence, especially if you're not going to wait for this to hit the lower band again. The lower band is going to be the safest area though. This right here, you can see we turned red. Did we have a solid close? This is not a solid close. This is not a solid close. Those are baby candles. That's not very convincing to me whatsoever. And so what happened next is we popped up to the upper band right here. This was the first touch, even though we didn't close below the lower band. I mean, we did, but it wasn't a solid close. I need something convincing, a good candle that's going to tell me, hey, this is probably going to continue to move in our direction. But it didn't do that. Nonetheless, we hit the upper band, and then it did pull back all the way down to the lower band. So we did see a pullback of 190, 150 down to 187.60, about 400 pips. So we did get a pullback on that, which was nice. But again, this is not something that I would take as a trade, because even though the THV had turned down, it was red, we didn't really have a solid close, so I'm not really that convinced that this is going to continue south. So there's that. The next one, again, we already went over this right here. Going backwards a little bit further, you can see we turned red right here. Did we have a solid close below the lower band? Nope, we sure did not. We did have a solid close above it right here, so you may say, well, maybe it's time to get in on a first touch. Nope, THV is red, so again, you're not going to get into that. Even though it did bounce to the upper side of the band, it's really not attractive to me. So by the time you did get a solid close, I'd say this is okay, not really what I'm going for. But again, the THV is buried. You're way too far away. You don't want that. Again, right after you turn, these are the best areas to get into the market. Going to the next one right here, you've got it turning green right here. Solid close above the upper band. And this is actually a pretty good area too. Why? You've got support. You've got a brand new high. We took out this last high here. You took out this last high right here. We came all the way back down to support. So if you're familiar with structure trades, this was in fact a structure setup right here. So it did bounce. It closed above the upper band. THV is green, so we got our qualifier. And then it pulls back to the lower band, which was right here. This was the lower band. This is a little concerning, to be quite honest. This probably would have made me shy away from the trade. Nonetheless, the THV was green. First touch of the lower band, solid close. You're good to go, and the market continues to move up. Now, again, going back down to the lower time frames, I like to check and see here if there was any other confluences saying, hey, it's probably going to stop at the lower band. So let's go down to the daily time frame. Turn this off. We're going to scroll back just a little bit. So here we are. This is basically the bottom right here before it took off again. This is the big spike up. That scared me. We pulled back down, and the lower band was right here, 177 pretty much. And what do you have here? You've got the coral down here, and you also have the 800 period moving average. If that's not enough for you, just a little bit lower, you have the 500 down here as well. You may even be able to make a case for this nice little trend line right here. So you got a trend line, you got your 800, you got your coral, and then on the weekly time frame, what do you got? You've got your lower band. So everything looked really good right here. It is again. Really nice trade setup. And again, this went from 177 pretty much all the way up to 188, about 1,100 pips back to resistance up there. So another nice trading setup right there. Let's go to the next one here. This is where we turn green. Solid close? Not really. This is okay. This really right here is the solid close right down here. And so you would look for a pushback into the bands and preferably to the other side of the bands, and then you would be able to short with limited risk. But unfortunately, it did not hit the upper band until right here. And guess what? The THV was green. So there's no way you would want to short that because you want the THV to be red and recently crossed down. So, but looking at this, let's say that you get your solid close right here. You get a small little push up right here. Back up to the 200 and the coral, not quite the upper band, but if, let's say you're a risky trader and you're like, man, I want to get into this. This looks really good, even though you are at support, by the way, which is not a good idea to trade off of. Because of this right here, I probably wouldn't be looking to take a short on this because you are at support and it's probably going to be looking to bounce and structure support at that. But if you go down to the daily time frame, here's your solid close right here. And then you can see we pushed up like this before we continued to fall back down. The only case I can possibly see for this is maybe a trend line. I mean, it's not even, didn't really even hit the trend line right here. It didn't come that far up. But if it would have hit the trend line, it would have been right here. you would add a trend line, support, 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 broken, and then you get your 200 up there. So that would have been a pretty good area, 178.87. Going back to the weekly time frame here, 178.87 would have been right here. Still would have been a little bit shy of the upper band, but that would have been a pretty stellar area to get into the market. So that would have been a good area to sell based off of solid close. THV is red and dropping, and you're pulling back into the bands. Not quite to the upper band, but again, you do have a lot of confluence on the daily time frame. So that's a pretty good area to sell off of. Going to the next trade setup or potential, you can see we turn green right here after creating this double bottom, which I like, by the way, quite a bit. You have a solid close right here. Before we go any further, though, let me get rid of some of these lines here so we don't confuse anybody. Solid close right here. Double bottom, we are at the neckline. And so it's probably going to head up to this area at least. So what we have here, you see the pullback right here to the 200. It was not to the lower band, and a lot of times it's not going to go that far. But let's put this line right here on your chart. Again, like I said, just crossing up. You don't want to get into them when they're up this far. You want to get them right at the beginning. But you have a nice solid close right here. So now you're looking for areas to get into this market. Again, the safest will be the lower band, which also has the coral down here. But again, if you're afraid to miss your trade, go down to the daily time frame. And let's see if we can, let's get rid of some of these lines here. I'm confusing myself. Okay, so there's the solid close going back down to the daily time frame. It's actually going to be, again, this is daily and weekly. It's probably going to be, is it this one right here? Let me put some prices on here. This is kind of tricky. Solid close was at 180 pretty much here, so going down to the daily time frame. Yeah, it looks like this was it. This was a solid close right here. So here's the pullback. Wow. Yeah, it didn't pull back very far at all. It only pulled back to the lower band right here, which is, well, not very far. Now, where can you, like, where would you think to get into this trade setup? If you were looking at this and you're like, man, it's not going to quite make it to the lower band, where's a good area to get into this, really? So let me show you where I would look to get into it. This right here. You got a nice downtrend. We clearly broke it. So if we can break it and pull back into this downtrend or this downtrending trend line, this right here would be a great spot to go long. And you can also see you've got the 200 right here. You got the 800 and you got the coral. So if we could have pulled back just a little bit further down to that area, that would have been a really good area to get into the market. Again, that's around 176.50. Go back to the weekly time frame. 176.50 would have been right here. Depending on how quickly, if it would have waited till this candle to drop down there, that would have been the lower band. So if it would have pulled back on the first candle, this wouldn't have quite been the lower band. But again, that's the area right there. Pretty close to coral too. So that's where I would look to get in. The other thing I want to mention too, well, actually, no, I was going to say divergence, but there's not really that much. So we're not even going to talk about that. But the next one you want to look at here is going to be this right here. You can see we turned red. Right here's your first solid close right here. Let's move this back over here. Solid close. So what you want to do is you would then want to look for a pretty quick pullback. And then you want to get into this as a short, because if it's turning red, it's probably going to continue to move south, especially with a lower band. So you can see we did pop up pretty good right here. Did it again right here. But really, we didn't hit the upper bands all the way over here. And guess what? By the time we got over there, the THV has gone a long way and you're turning green again. So you would not sell here. So the only option for getting a trade on this would be to try to short probably on this candle right up in here. So again, I want to go back down to the lower time frame and I want to see if maybe there is some sort of confluence saying, hey, the market's probably going to stop there even though we're not quite up to the resistance of the upper band. Again, solid close right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back down to the daily time frame. I hate how these are not exact. It makes it so difficult. Our solid close was right here at, looks like 179.50 on April 29th. Wow. Okay, 179.50 is going to be right here. Okay, so here's what happened. Wow, this is actually really, really nice. Here's your solid close right here. This big sell candle right here. This is a weekly solid close right here. We stopped right here. Look where we went up to. We went up to this area right here. This was support, 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 support. Broke below it, and then we're back up to retest it. Also notice that this is the coral up here as well. So there is actually quite a bit of support, or excuse me, resistance at the 182 area. So this is actually a very good area to short. Again, the upper band would have been right around, pull this up here, right around this area right here. So didn't quite make it up to the upper band, but you have a tremendous amount of resistance right up here. Another thing I want to add onto this chart is, whoops, grab the wrong one here. You have a little bit of a trend line. I guess it's not, it's a little bit off. Pretty darn close though. But this was your trend line. I don't know if we can go back any further or not. Guess the trend line was a little bit off. I was going to say it looked like there might have been a trend line up there too, but I guess we don't have that. But again, like I said though, what we do have is we've got our solid close. This is the pullback. This is where we stopped at, which was support broken, and it was also the coral right here. So pretty good area of resistance. Again, the upper band wasn't until up here, but a lot of times, like I said, you may not hit the upper band when it comes to these trades, and if you do, it's too late, and you don't want to get into those. So there's that one. The next one we have is we turned green right here. Solid close right up in here. So you would look for your first available pullback to the lower band. And then you can see it really, this was the spot where we hit the lower band. I like this because basically you have one big candle up and then you have a lot of consolidation sideways at resistance. What I don't like to see is this red. That should not be popping up on our charts. That's not showing me that there's a ton of momentum on this. So that probably would have made me shy away if it didn't pop up by the time I got into the trade already. But in the event it's not there until after I jumped in, well, it turned out pretty good. So, but again, going for the best ones only. You don't want to take the crappy ones because that's where you're going to get your losses at typically. Although there are times when you're going to get a perfect setup and it's not going to work out because that's just how trading is. But so far, as you can see, all these have worked out pretty darn good. The next one I want to look at is, again, we reversed right here. Turns red. Got a little nice little top. You've even got a trend line here. Just shy of it, but pretty darn close to it. It turns red. Did we get a solid close? No, we did not get a solid close, and then it took off again to the upside. So there was no trade there. Again, solid close is very important. You want to make sure you get that. The next one you have turning green right here. You can see a big solid candle right here. This is beautiful. I love this. We did break through the coral. We kind of consolidated sideways. We hit the lower band, which was also coral right here. THV continues to be green. It's moving up. It just crossed up, so it's not too late. Again, once you begin to get into this area right here, it's gone pretty far. And again, it's going to take a little while to eyeball these and figure out exactly how far is too far. But support right here, lower band, momentum's up. Got your coral down here. And let's see if there's any other support down there as well. Let's go to the lower time frames. Again, this is the weekly, so we're going to go down to the next lower time frame. We're going to go down to the daily time frame. And so here it is. Here's our solid close, big candle up, and then you're going to get our slow retracement back down. And guess where it stopped at? Stopped at the coral. Not really surprised there at all. And you also have the 200 period moving average right there on top of that. Again, let's go back to the daily, or excuse me, the weekly time frame. Zoom in a little bit here. Again, you can see the big solid close, and then you add your slow retracement back down on the daily, and then this was the bottom of it right here, which was the quarter, and then it took off. And again, where would you look to exit something like that? Obviously, you can see we had a nice move up here. When I'm looking into resistance up into here, this is when I'm looking to take some off the table, especially as we move into the trend line. If you're a brave soul and you're like, you know what, this is going to continue going, I'm going to hold longer. Obviously, you could take some off up here. This, again, when it's a trend line, and you can see, well, it continued to go and go and go and go. And also, one of the things I want to encourage you to do is look at the higher time frames. Look at the monthly time frame. Look and see what that's doing. That's going to tell you how far this may be looking to run. In other words, let's say you get in right here where this is crosses at. This is your entry. A lot of you are like, well, I can't hold that long. This is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is 2 months you're waiting on this trade to play out. So by the time you get up to here, you're by the trend line, you're at the 200, you're at the 500, you're like, man, this is probably a good time to get out. And I can't fault you for that at all. But what you want to do a lot of times, if you're one of them people that is able to hold for months and months and months and it doesn't bother you, go up to the monthly time frame. What do you have on the monthly time frame? Look at this. Here's where you get in at. The THV was red, and I mean, it was, it was green, blazing up, even though we pulled back right here. Green going up, pulled back right here, green going up. That tells me there is a ton of momentum in this, and it has the ability to go quite far. Obviously, by the time we get to the red coral, this is probably when I'd be entirely out, especially as we turned red here. But the key in figuring out if you should let a trade run a long time is going to be your higher time frame. So in this case, the monthly was screaming, buy me, buy me, buy me, and hold me, hold me, hold me. So that would have been, again, a nice little runner right there. Let's go back. Let's go to the next one. You can see we crossed down right here. This is actually a pretty nice one right here. We crossed down right here. Solid close. Would have been nice if it would have been a little bit better than that, but that's still what I would consider solid close. Not too bad. THV is red. We pushed back up. I love the way this pushed back up. We got 3 small candles back up. THV continues to drop and separate really hard, even though we are pushing back up. This is a very beautiful thing. You want to see this. So you would probably want to sell up in here, upper band. And then you can see, where do we go? We went all the way back down to support down here. So again, this one went from 170.50 all the way down to 161.50. So that's about a 900 pip fall. And again, like I've been doing, I want to go back down to the daily time frame, and I want to see if there were any other confluences telling you this is a good area to sell. So going down to the daily time frame. Again, big solid close down, slowly retracing back up, and guess where we stopped at? We stopped at the coral. Not only was there a coral there, but you had a nice little trend line. So you got your trend line, and you've got the coral moving average right here, which was what? It was the first touch of the upper band after a solid close, with THV recently turning red. And again, right here, same old story. You're looking for a solid close. That's kind of iffy there. I'm not really a big fan of that, although we are at pretty good support, and I do like this nice little slow retracement back down. That's pretty. Not really what I'm going for. I'm looking for something like this. But again, by the time we had this, we didn't really come back and touch the lower band until right here. And by that point, there's no way you'd want to get into something like that with it being that high. So again, that's something that I would want to shy away from. Next one, you've got a nice solid close right here. THV turning red. First touch of the upper band right up here. Look what happened. We continue to sell off right here. Again, same old story, over and over and over again. As you can see, these usually work out pretty decently. Again, not everyone's going to work. Even the best ones sometimes do fail. So you want to keep that in mind here. But you want to take the ones that are going to offer you the best reward with the littlest amount of risk. So if you can get some that are close to support, or you can get some early on in the trend, that's great. It's going to increase your reward to risk, which is ultimately how you win this game. So, but hopefully that helped. Don't want to make this video too lengthy. We're already at over 30 minutes. So hopefully you got something out of it. If you have any questions, please let me know.